Welcome back to the Queer Circle podcast, where queer healers come to the mic to share their journeys and what they tell their younger selves. Today's guest is Reverend Dr. David William Parry, a gay man based in Greater London, UK. David has an extensive education with a bachelor's in religious studies at King's College London, master's of pastoral theology at Haythorpe College, University of London, and an honorary Doctor of Divinity from the Holy See of Antioch and the Apostolic Old Catholic Church. He has received mentorship from Mr. Jesse Thompson and served for over 30 years as a minister of religion. David is the founder and minister of religion at Valentine's Hall, Metropolitan Community Church Oasis, based in Balham, South London. Welcome to the Queer Circle, David.
In terms of origin, whoa, I suppose I'm a country boy, a hick, a redneck, if such things exist in Great Britain. I mean, I was born in Portsmouth in Hampshire, which I'm very proud of. Hampshire's a beautiful county, very historic. St. Mary's in Portsmouth, although I suppose like everybody else, everyone's a bit of a mixture here. You can't have wonderful sort of Germanic purity rules in this part of the world because they never work. I'm a bit Welsh, I'm a bit Irish, I'm a bit Italian. Very, very proud of the Welsh bit. Very, very proud of the Welsh bit. My mother was an honest countrywoman who came from Kent, the Garden of England. Don't know much about my biological father because he was a bit of a cad and walked out of the household quite early on. How some people sleep at night, I don't know, but I've learned a lot since then. They managed to. My stepfather was an incredible guy, sort of a Northern Irish stoker in the Royal Navy. I mean, thereby hangs a tale. A Roman Catholic in one of the counties owned by Britain still, Great Britain. So the stories of prejudice in this day and age, are absolutely unbelievable. And I remember them to this day. I mean, sadly, both of them are passed on. I visit Hampshire wherever I can. My first job was working on a farm, so that proves my country boy credentials, I hope. And it was wonderful. Apart from the winter was awful, freeze your arse off. Everything frigid all around you, but the summer was idyllic. And I remember nothing but butterflies and leafy lanes and an old ruined abbey that had been there for hundreds of years and lovely, lovely crystal streams flowing everywhere through the farmlands. And I hated it. How about this for a confession, Queer Circle? In those days, I remember thinking, oh my God, I'll never amount to anything here. I've got to get away. So we actually formed an escape committee, the Fareham Rascals, to smuggle ourselves to London. And we got here, thank heavens, and now I miss every single minute, thinking, oh my God, what was wrong with me? That was close to paradise. What on earth was wrong with me? Took my other half down there not too long ago. Never go back. So I'd never go back to where I came from, because the memories are the memories and everything moves on. Though I have noticed sort of English heritage have taken a great interest in it recently because it's so beautiful. And I'm very, very proud Hampshire hog. But, those other bits always gave me a sort of internationalist perspective. But, in Britain, I don't think that's too uncommon, really. All this row about, are we European or are we not European? The answer for hundreds of years has been yes and no. So it's both at the same time, the fact we haven't learned to live with that yet, I find extraordinary. But there was we were part of Europe before. It was Henry VIII that actually stopped us being a part of the European community back in those days. So you could say there's nothing new under the sun, and it's just all happening again. And the poshest thing I ever heard. Oh God, who was that guy that used to do the Death Wish movies? Michael Sir Michael something or other. I can never remember his last name. I've got a mental block about him. I mean, he was actually a lot of fun. I indirect friends with him, believe it or not. The poshest thing I ever heard was Europe, Europe. Oh, those wonderful wines and all that cheese. So his way of relating with Europe was through the food. And you can sort of think about that, yeah. So I'm very pro-European, curiously or not curiously, it's a state, as the case may go. Very proud of Hampshire, very proud of my origin. Relaxed, idyllic countrysides, miss it awfully, but I think my partner and I are hoping and proving to move to Lanzarote as opposed to going back to rural idiocy and having warm sunshine and all those wonderful drinks and wines and different types of cheese and different types of poultry and different types of vegetable. We're looking forward to that in the future. So that's I'm crossing my fingers as we're speaking and hoping for the best and putting out positive energies to make it happen. Oh gosh, it's a classic chestnut, I know, and it's important. It's important for our community, and maybe even more so now. I mean, I was one of the old-time activists in Britain, so the reason I didn't speak about LGBTQI issues or anti-Semitism for over a decade was I thought they'd been bloody solved. What is the problem? I thought all this had been discussed and solved. And things are going backwards now. I can't believe that. With all the work and all the stress and all the sweat and all the tears that everybody had in those days, I find it difficult to believe, but oh gosh, where do I begin with that one? I mean, I suppose I'm traditional British gay in the sense of Noel Coward, awfully, you never mention it. You only mention it if it comes up at dinner parties. So when was I faced with that frightful moment when you have to actually stare yourself in the mirror and say, look, something's going on here, Actually, it was when I'd moved to London. I'd finally joined the escape committee and came to the city. And I was working in an office, which was the Registry of Friendly Society and the Building Societies Commission, a branch of the Treasury. God knows why. I had no money, and I had no money. So, but it was a job. And I remember thinking about one of the people there. Oh, he's good looking. And I don't know, there was sort of cumulative effect in that. I suddenly thought, but it caught myself thinking that. So if you're thinking that, it means you're gay. I suspect my generation, because we were under lots of pressures that I don't think the modern generation is under, and that's no disrespect to the modern generation. And I actually think they're dealing with different pressures. I don't think they're dealing with less. I think they're dealing with different ones. I suppose that had been at the back of my mind for years, and having a spirituality, having a Christianity where you think, oh God, what does that mean about me and my community and my life? So you instantly think you're one of God's celibates, and what I didn't know at the time was actually a lot of gay men in my generation actually felt that and thought that. Only because that was the logical choice. You are such and such means. They were, I don't want to be that. Oh my God. So you end up thinking, it's better to avoid the issue altogether. But I'm from country stock. I mean, the minute the penny had dropped, which it did in that moment, I thought, well, no, I mean, I'm not leading two lives. That's not me. Do your best to drag me down, world. I don't care. So I eventually sort of lived with it, picked off my parents, oh, there was a scene in itself. I think you'll love this. I went to their house one evening, and my mother was watching that. It started off as a wonderful soap opera called EastEnders, and the scripts were amazing. But, it turned into this sort of typical nothing, this mash of nothing. And my stepdad was a little pie-eyed. He'd had a drink or two, so I hadn't chosen the right evening to make my declaration of faith. And I timidly knocked at their front door. They let me in. I said, Mother, I've got something to tell you. I'm gay. And she hadn't noticed, because it's just me turning up saying something. And she said, look, I'm watching EastEnders. so I said, so I took that on board for a minute, and I said, look, I've got something to say, and it's quite important. And my stepdad joined in saying, Joan, I think he's got something to say. So then I stood in the middle of both of them and said, look, I'm homosexual. Then to which I got this renewed chorus, David, I'm trying to listen to the TV, with my stepdad again saying, look, Joan, he's trying to say something important. And it went on and on. So I thought, right, there's only one way of dealing with this. I stood in front of the TV and said, listen, I'm a screeching queer and I'm proud of it. Yeah, and don't bother to slam the door behind me, because I'll do it for you. And what I heard on the way out was my mother saying, what did he say, Jerry? And then my stepdad say I couldn't hear him. So I slammed the door behind me, because I thought somebody had to do it. If you've gone through one of those, rites of passage, a threshold moment, somebody's got to do it. I got a phone call about an hour and a half later. I got back to my own flat saying, we completely disapprove, but by the way, you're our son, so we're sending you a new TV. So that was my coming out, my coming out experience. I think we've got to be much more sensitive to what generations feel and think. I mean, it taught me a lot about their generation, where those things simply didn't happen. You lived your life, under the radar. You lived your life incommunicado, which is wrong. It's absolutely wrong. But it also taught me to trust people a bit more. I mean, at the end of the day, they stood by me. And curiously, it was the liberals. I hate to get very, very unfashionable. It was the liberals and the socialists that we knew that let me down, because they understood and they sympathized until they realized I meant it. And that led to a very different story. So it was the rednecks from the countryside that actually came through. Having said that, all of my friends were wonderful. I decided to pick them off one by one. By the way, this is what's happening. This is the fact. And all of them stood by me. So I think we've got to be less judgmental of each other, cut each other some slack, and yet let people deal with it in their own way, and then see what the honest response is. So I learned that. To be honest, it was one of those wonderful therapeutic and healing experiences, because I suddenly thought, oh my God, I've been given the green light to lead my own life, and I didn't expect them to do it in that way. But, in real terms, we don't live in paradise. It only took an hour and a half to receive the green light. And then I thought, right, okay, I can get on with it. And, that's me. So that was my sort of, my moment of initiation. And I don't regret it at all. Moments of initiation are meant to be rocky, otherwise they're meaningless. I noticed for some strange reason after that, every time I went back to family Sunday lunch, my portion was bigger. I don't know what that meant. And I never had the guts to ask. But yeah, I mean, it all worked out in the end. So that's the answer to that one, I think. Curiously, that links in with my work as a pastor. I mean, I used to go around saying years back, English literature, global text is also a part of my religion, which I hold by. I've learned so much from novels. I've learned so much from poetry, from poems. Curiously, some of my mentors were sort of astral in the sense that they were poets from the past that I'd never get to meet, and they were long dead. But simply they wrote in such a way that it was clear they understood what the problems were and what the realities were. And the general advice was, well, worse things happen at sea, get on with it. If they were living in Puritan times, the Puritans come out of this brilliantly, curiously. And that was the other irony. How come they deal so well with it and the others don't? So I got told by a British Puritan, a British evangelical years ago, as I say, I was ahead of my time in quoting, well, worse things happen at sea, which I thought was very, very down to earth. And then I was going to say something to extend the conversation, to which I was told, look, it's between you and God. Can we get on with the committee meeting? So that was that was my big battle with the evangelicals. I mean, it didn't go according to plan from my side, but I think it did from theirs. Oh gosh, I mean, the very, very early people in Stonewall, the very, very early people on Fire Island. You know, I don't like the mythology that's beginning to surround Fire Island. You know, that basically it was one huge 60s loving, because you know, actually it was a process. Fire Island wasn't a particular time and a place; it was a process. And also, you know, they were lucky to be able to steer each other out. And I seem to remember being told by a good friend of mine that if two guys wanted to dance, they had to stand shoulder by shoulder, shoulder to shoulder. They couldn't actually look at each other or stand in front of each other. So, you know, I hate the mythology for the simple reason it minimizes the bravery and it minimizes the sheer willpower to lead your own life in your own way. And I don't like that minimized. That is extraordinarily brave and inspiring and powerful. You know, I've got the typical heroes, I suppose, of a minister. Martin Luther King, I'm not sure he said too much about it, but the overall attitude, you know, free at last, praise God Almighty, free at last. Mahatma Gandhi, you know, it was all about finding your place in the community and not letting the community be beaten, not letting it be screwed down, not letting it be held down in any way. I think that's been very important to me. Quentin Crisp, curiously, and you know, if I'm wearing the other hat of British theatrical, I mean, I didn't actually have the privilege of meeting him, but certainly I had friends that knew him and had worked with him, because he had not only a successful show in London, an incredibly intelligent man, ferociously intelligent man, but also, of course, he had his sellout show on Broadway. I mean, you know, that's not to be forgotten. And it was, you know, I could never work out with him how much of it was theatre and how much of it wasn't, because he was that generation of queer, and I don't think he'd have disliked the word queer at all. I think he'd have loved it. You know, he was telling everybody at one point how he was trying to teach people not to be gay. Well, you know, the lover of ironies, you know, please don't take that at face value. You know, and anyone that would turn up in a pink jacket with a felt hat on, you know, they're not exactly trying to give you the conversion therapy, are they? So, you know, you've got, but he was again from that sort of Noel Cow generation where everything was ironic and crisp and funny. And certainly the fact he never backed down from an insult in his life, but tried to turn it around into a healing moment, or into a moment of expanded consciousness, or dare I say, a moment of triumph. I mean, from his book, The Naked Civil Servant, and of course it was on that incredible TV movie with John Hurt, when John Hurt was just starting out in his career. I remember reading the book and nearly dropping it with awe when it got to the bit where he was one of the older queer residents of London, and he was beginning to get sick of London. So we all get sick of Mordor in the end. There we are. Dr. Johnson, if you're tired of London, you're tired of life, well, try and come and live in it now, dear. Let's see if you want to say that nowadays. I bet you wouldn't. We'll all be off to Zurich. Anyway, or Hawaii. Let's all go to Hawaii. That's much more fun. No, I mean, it was when he's confronted by some young boys who come over to Quentin Crisp and say, if you don't give us some money, we're going to tell the nearby policeman that you've been making improper suggestions to us, which does happen. And in the book, and apparently according to our mutual friends, this is a true moment. It's an iconic queer moment. He turned to them and say, I mean, you can't get more queer than Quentin Crisp. I mean, let's face it. He turned to them and said, do your worst. I am one of the stately homos of Great Britain. So I dropped the book when I heard that, burst out laughing, but my admiration levels went through the roof, because I was sat there thinking, oh my God, would I say that? Or would I be running down the road thinking they've told a copper? Yeah. Oh my God, they've been misleading. No, I mean, he was brave, he was courageous, he was funny, he was witty. So I think really, because there was a link with theatre and there was a link with authorship, that he would be, apart from sort of writers and poets and great sages of humanity, he'd have to be my sort of queer spiritual guide, because he did everything right, and he did it with aplomb, and he did it with style, and he did it with savoir-faire. Oh, look, God consciousness is in that. And God consciousness was, Christ consciousness was in that moment. And anyone that can't see that knows nothing about Christ consciousness. Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, Jesse H. Thompson. Oh, God, this is where all the non-queer community think I'm sort of working in league with the powers of darkness, I suppose. Yes, I like New Age people. Yes, I like New Age people. I think they're really sweet. I can't see what the problem is. I went, again, it's lessons, and initiatic moments when you cross a threshold. I went to the Findhorn Foundation, the Findhorn community, in 1978. That bloody ages me, doesn't it? When the BBC were going into meltdown. Now, let me say something about the BBC. In those days, you knew it was the voice of truth, and every government hated them because all they did was say what everybody knew was. Nobody'd say that about them now, but they said what everyone made. If it was true, the BBC would say it, which is why it got such a reputation. Oh, how are the mighty fallen? What a great shame. But there we are. I went to the Findhorn Foundation after reading a book called The Magic of Findhorn, and thinking, and it coming up on national news, gigantic vegetables, carrots the size of a man's arm and so on. What on earth is going on there? And then it came out that sort of the original Findhorn hub had been a couple of really strange but wonderful people. Peter Caddy, who'd been in the RAF, the Royal Air Force, so an unlikely founder for a New Age community, with his dear lady wife, who I met a couple of times, Eileen Caddy, who was awfully posh. I mean, I remember the first time I met her thinking, you're not what I expect. She was in her pearl necklace and dressed awfully, awfully nicely. Oh my God, you're some sort of New Age person. And Dorothy McLean, who I never got to meet. And they were, gosh, I mean, she was a sensitive and a healer, and she used to feel that higher powers. I mean, they called them the Devas. I think they were using a deliberately Hindu terminology. I mean, all that means is shining ones, a higher power. She felt they were trying to guide them and help them. Certainly, Peter Caddy was into mysticism, pure mysticism. So that was interesting, which I believe he took a shine to in India because he was stationed in India during the war. And they were so poor after his demob and working in a local hotel and yada yada yada, that they were trying to interact not only on a sophisticated level with the environment, but in a living way. They felt the environment was sentient, and it would work with people. If it knew what you needed, it would start working with you. And all of a sudden, nature goes berserk and starts producing gigantic vegetables in their little humble patch of land, because they were poor. They were growing their own vegetables. The local news in Scotland, this was in Scotland, it was practically sand. It wasn't even proper soil. The local news team got hold of it because, by anybody's expectations, that was odd, and they couldn't work out what was going on. The BBC got hold of it. What on earth is happening here? The Soil Association turned up, an august ecological institution, saying, well, we don't know what's going on either. But, and all of a sudden, they started saying, well, this is what we're trying to do. We believe the world is alive. We believe in, as we'd say nowadays, in Gaia, and what we're trying to do is, work with those Gaia influences. So I thought, well, that's interesting. So I went up there, as they just bought a place called Cluny Bank, which was a castle. I mean, they prospered and prospered. I haven't been there for years, but I met someone called Jesse Thompson, who, again, shame on me, thinking you know things by, never judge by appearances. Judge not lest ye be judged, because every time I've done that, I've been wrong. And there was this gentleman in tweeds sat outside, that sort of wonderful Californian group hug where you all get to know each other. Hi, I'm David. So which I love. I was the generation for that, which I love. But he wasn't from that generation. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, with the best foot in the world, you're the person I'm going to have trouble with here. You're the person I'm not going to get to know. 4 days later, he was the best friend I'd ever made in my life, had turned out to be the biggest rebel I've ever met in my life. Just an extraordinary man. So he started introducing me to what some people would call the esoteric. What he found, I mean, he would say it's sort of like an expanded type of intuitive knowledge. It's not competing doctrines, it's ways of working with the cosmos. And that is, honestly, I'm paraphrasing rapidly, but that's what he felt it all was. And the cosmos is full of healing, and it's full of sustenance and nutrition. And so I remain greatly indebted to him. And it started, I suppose, if I'm honest, it started a bit before that anyway. My love with the existentialists. I mean, the reason I've got no teeth left, I'm now opening my mouth to show my interviewer. The reason I've got no teeth left is I used to bite hard literature as part of my own maturing process. I mean, I didn't go out for 2 years when I was a teenager, because what I was trying to do was devour the world's novels. And the best 2 years as a teenager I had. You've got everything. If you look at Dostoevsky, he gives you the world. You know what everybody's going through and how they're feeling. Or if you look at Hermann Hesse, or if you read Shakespeare, extraordinary materials we need to draw on. And I come across the existentialists, excuse me, Jean-Paul Sartre. Oh, stop moaning, you Frenchman. Jean-Paul Sartre. And I got interested in all of that. And I thought, well, what he's doing, if you've got some sort of faith, what he's trying to do is corner you. So how can you stand up? What can you say to someone like him? And I thought, well, that's interesting because it's not hostile, it's probing. It's probing. And I eventually came across one of his collaborators, one of his friends called Gabriel Marcel, who was a Christian existentialist, a Roman Catholic apologist. And I suddenly thought, well, I sort of fit in with this. I'm some sort of Christian existentialist. I don't like Christian idealism, which is the vast majority of Christian witness, because too many people get left out. This is the perfect image of what it means to be a Christian. Oh my God, you're not that. There's something wrong with you. But that doesn't strike me as what the scripture says. Bless them that curse you, love them that hate you. So it's not saying that. It's saying something else. So I got to read him very deeply. I'm thinking of doing a book on him, or one of his plays. He was a prolific playwright at some point. And I think maybe modern Christianity, which is more and more misunderstood by the day. I mean, it's not one thing. It's all the way from Russian Orthodoxy and high ritual and all those breathtakingly beautiful celebrations they do, all the way through the Church of England, all the way through sort of Metropolitan Community Church, all the way through Congregationists down to Quakers. I mean, it's loads of different things. And maybe we've all got to stop taking pot shots at each other and, what have we got in common? And maybe we'll find something really beautiful beneath it all. But I suspect it's not the idealists, and let's not minimize them too much. I mean, what they were trying to do was say, look, there's another greater level to human life. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. There's something true in you, and that's wonderful. But I think it's a dangerous position to begin from. We've got to begin from a much more hands-on, this is who we are, this is what we are, and where do we go from here? I think not only that's more honest, but it's probably a lot more Christian in the best sense of the word, as a path to walk. Philip K. Dick. I remember the first time I read Valis, the vast active living intelligence system. I'm thinking, oh my God, I want some of that. And I got interested in Gnosticism. I mean, one of my consecrations, curiously, is in Valentinian Gnosticism. I got invited over to Italy, after a lengthy discussion, because I wasn't sure they were what they said they were. I think so, I got shown all these documents. Hey, I'm not a historian, you know what I mean? But it looked legit to me, and I was actually consecrated in a beautiful ceremony in an Italian monastery, believe it or not. And they felt that was there to help empower my ministry. I thought they were correct, because it gives you these other views of what Christianity can be, and also their view. I mean, there are two traditions of Gnosticism in Europe. The French stream, as it's called, and the Italian stream. I think the Italian stream is smaller, because it prides itself on actually being able to trace its steps through the centuries. Whereas the French stuff is more exciting, and you end up with all these crazy guys, running around and insulting everybody at the Café Royal, which is much more fun, admittedly, but you're not so sure of the steps that got them there. And I came away from that Italian experience thinking, no, I can actually see what they meant. If Gnosticism really is the knowledge of the heart, what they've given me is a new theology. It's not meant to replace anything. It's meant to run parallels. I came away feeling very enriched and very grateful to something that sometimes we do in my own church. We have a Valentinian meditation circle. And I think we've done that in such a way where nobody's unhappy with it, because we've adopted the attitude, look, if you find this helpful, come and join us. If you don't join us. There we are. And we'll find something else to do. So that's what we've done. And we resonate 100% on that. I mean, Gnosticism, particularly curiously, and it's not me being partisan, when it's in its Christian forms, I think is really comprehensible. Some of it is so esoteric and abstract, I'm not even sure it can be unpacked in the modern world. I mean, if I'm looking at some of the teachings of Basilides, or I'm looking even at some of the Christian teachings, the Gospel of Thomas, and we should never have been thrown out of mainstream Christianity, but there's another row for another time at somewhere. When the two are one, sorry, right, can you run that past me again? So, I've lost the point of reference already. But no, I think if you're looking at if you think Christian Gnosticism is already a part of the tradition, and therefore I've got all the sort of main symbolic points of reference I need to be able to work it out, then it becomes this amazing resource that helps us find our own humanity. And the Gnostics would say our humanity is tantamount to infinite. I mean, what an encouraging message. What a message we need for these turbulent times. Gosh, you've ruined my script for drama porn, but oh no. Everything I intended to say has been thrown out the window. Oh gosh, no, look, I to be honest, I haven't had too much of that. I've never, I think if you've got the Gnostic element, you don't really go through a crisis of faith, because you realize actually lots of people are brought to faith by a crisis. It doesn't mean it lessens your faith. Actually, for a lot of people, it increases faith. And I don't know. I mean, I've had ups and downs with the sort of ideology of Christianity, but not Christianity. That sort of fits in with the existential stuff. Yeah, I mean, relationships that didn't last the end of time, to the end of time when you thought they would. And why didn't they? I mean, I'm incredibly fortunate now. 61 troops. Everybody listen to this. There is somebody out there for you. I just wish it hadn't taken me till 62 to discover it. My God. But there's somebody out there. So no, I think I lost faith from time to time. No, let me take that back. My faith was radically reduced from time to time, in the fact that things would work out in a human and all-rounding way, and I blame myself for that. We should always think, well, no, we've got a duty to ourselves as well as to each other. Don't fall to such an extent whereby you've crippled yourself and you're crippling the people around you. So I'm not sure I was actually that bad, but I think I might have been close to it a couple of times. Simply because, right, so there's a job crisis or there's a money crisis. I'm still in the money crisis. I'm open to all donations. And I think relationships, I think in the queer, the LGBTQIA community, because standards of expectation are deliberately refused us, we're not allowed that. We're not allowed to see ourselves, not really as a loving lesbian couple with kids. You're not really allowed to see yourself as a trans lady who can lead a fulfilling life. Not really. And my criticism of all of us in the queer community is putting up with that. Why do we put up with that? We are human as much as everybody else. How dare you all treat us that way? And the fact we're not allowed these archetypes, these prototypes, which are there in myth and symbol and history, they're all there. I think that means we do fall lower and harder than other people when the existential in life actually encounters us. I do think that. I don't know if I can mention names. I mean, when I first went to MCC, I was there for a long time. It was about a decade. I mean, this is my homecoming. This is my homecoming. I remember when AIDS first hit London. It had been in the country. It had been in the country for some time, but it first hit properly in the early to mid 80s. I mean, I was at a funeral every week for a year. That is when it hits you. And I remember saying to my friends when we got to November, look, I can't take any more. I'm sorry. I've got to go. I cannot do this. And we did have a 60s group hug, but it was very, very sad. And I thought, I'm not going to be David if I stay much more in these circles. They're in so many deaths, and the last one was the worst. A dear friend of mine, the Reverend Michael Moffat, who is now shining with the angels, his partner they were totally monogamous. He had a one-night stand and caught AIDS HIV because the guy he slept with didn't know. He didn't realize what had happened, and he gave it to Michael. So we went through. His partner was David. We went to David's funeral. There wasn't a dry eye in the church, in the house. When we watched Michael wither away like a leaf turning brown, and that was the one curiously that cracked me. We couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. So, and I think that was a wrong decision. I mean, there was so much. There's still so much to fight for. So that was certainly one of the darkest times. What does all this mean? Is Christianity delivering the goods? What are other traditions saying? So certainly I went on a journey for a couple of years looking at neo-paganism, looking at Gnosticism, and curiously finding the Christ energy everywhere. So I wasn't disappointed. And I think that was probably the darkest time because lots of people were just devastated in a way that made very, very, very little sense, and there was nothing anyone could do. This is where you suddenly cut the transmission. I will never trust a socialist as long as I live. They're meant to be the people that are all embracing. Right? Socialist fingers. No one lifted a finger in the Labour Party because it wasn't the British Labour Party at that particular time. And their attitude, the attitude of everybody, left and right in Parliament, well, it's just affecting a few gays and a few blacks will get it. So there we are. And then, of course, it started affecting the so-called mainstream community. And the attitude was, well, something needs to be done. And all these adverts were on TV warning people of the danger. I'll never trust a socialist as long as I live. That was their duty to think ahead of time and realize people were being hurt and murdered because the medical provision wasn't there. So I think, oh God, I've got angry. After all these years, I've got angry. Yeah, I mean, that for me, right. So relationships come and go apart from when you meet the right one, when you meet the one. Hold on, kids, hold on, troops. There is someone out there for you. So don't lose faith about stuff like that. But don't let your faith be undermined by the social and cultural factors which should be standing by you even when they're not. And who do I blame? I blame all of us for not giving the extra word of support for the trans lady, for not giving the extra word of support for your, the queer neighbours that I've got down the road, for not saying, hang on, we're decent, respectable human beings, and how dare you have the temerity to think that we're not paying our taxes, we're not professionals, we're not leading a full life, and even if we're not those things, treat us with a bit of respect. So that, you've got me angry, oh my God. Ha! So that my darkest moment led to a fuming pastor. There we are. Certainly there's nothing new about being queer or gay, and we all haven't fallen out the sky. We didn't suddenly land on a spaceship in 1990. And sort of the British attitude. There's always a sort of mental duplicity in this country, it's there, but it's not there. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world, but that's the British attitude. You get some incredibly posh people. a famous lesbian painter who's getting on now. That's all I'm saying as a point of reference. She was so posh. We met at a drinks do years back, and the question came up, when did you come out? And she said, oh, darling, I was never in. It's something that's, what was it? It's something the servants talk about. So you get the incredible posh bit, or you get the Queen Mother. I'm not having a go at the present Queen. I hope she's the last one because we need a modern democracy, not a monarchy, but there we are. The present one's a total professional. And yes, I rather like the idea of the living constitution. She embodies the constitution, therefore she's apolitical. I rather like that idea. I don't know how we do that more properly, but I rather like that idea. Certainly the Queen Mother, the last true Queen of England, who, if ever there was a fag hag, it's the old Queen Mother. Apparently she wouldn't employ anybody that wasn't gay for Claret's house because gay people had a much greater sensibility for how things should be run. And I knew people that worked there. My favourite story is that two queens have the rota for who should take Her Majesty, her brekkie first thing in the morning. There'd been a mistake on the register. So there was a clash between two queens on the stairway. I should be taking Her Majesty's breakfast this morning. How dare it was my turn. And apparently she came out dressed in a hairnet, screaming, can all this stop? There's one queen waiting for her breakfast. So, yeah, I mean, there's all that. The Church of England, I don't like taking pot shots at other churches. I don't like what they do because it's all a bit of a gag. It's all sixth form. It's all public school, oh yes, Father so-and-so, and he's not the marrying kind, is he? Wink, 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 oh yes, a Reverend Father, oh. Well, no one's seen him, no. And even that now, the don't look, don't tell, that attitude is going. Under this sort of uneasy pact that high church has made with low church, or in political terms, which are more understandable, what the establishment has made with the dirty oi polloi, which is most of us. The trouble with Anglican low church is that they tend to be evangelical of an American kind. They're not the old working class, gritty, not putting up with all this fuss. It's not that anymore. They're more sort of the doctrinal kind nowadays. I mean, more sort of influenced by Southern Baptism, whereas you need a checklist of what you believe before you can become ordained. I mean, that's ridiculous. Did the apostles sit an open exam in Galilee? No, they didn't. With Jesus saying, and what about this? Subsection 32.5. No, that didn't happen. So I don't like what really the established church, and of course we've got a state church unlike America. I mean, the Church of England, the Anglican Church is actually a branch of government. Therefore, all Anglican churches are actually government buildings, which people tend to forget. And there are the Lords Spiritual, which is a section of bishops in the House of Lords, which actually, of course, have a say in legislation. Therefore, Rowan Williams, who I know I've known on and off for years, the previous Archbishop had an uneasy ride about it all. I mean, everybody thought he was totally pro-gay, and actually all he was saying was, can we discuss this sensibly and try and reach a decision, which needed to be done. Of course, nobody did. I mean, the present incumbent will be, I've no time for at all. Get back to the oil industry, mate. You're not much of a cleric. He just thinks we should all go away and shut up. Well, that's not going to happen, Welby. We're here. Get used to it. So, no, I think in my own case, gay clergy, as far as I know, in the Anglican communion, don't get the plum jobs, and they're not really the people in in any type of realistic running for the Archbishop or Bishop of that. I'm really worried about Father so and so. So that tends to happen here. I think certainly in terms of low church, that really unbalances the territory. Certainly, I can easily see where opportunities that came my way suddenly vanished. With hindsight at 62, I'm a lot more skeptical that I wasn't the man for the job and that somebody somewhere had said something. But in low church, okay, I've survived. I'm still here. Um, Take it on the chin and get on with it. But yeah, I think there's still that, behind closed doors prejudice, which is really what the LGBTQIA community needs to challenge. I think we're going to be a lot more brave, even in the circumstances and conditions we find ourselves in. I mean, it's all everything really on our human level. I've no doubt there are mightier and finer states of consciousness. I've no doubt of that. What my error in my ministry, and I'm sure there are so many, I mean, the angels are listening to me now, I'm sure there are so many, is not having enough faith. The pastor that doesn't have enough faith, that, just stand your ground and things will work out. I regret that. So, right, relationships have failed because you haven't met the right guy yet. Keep the faith. The angels are on our side, and shame on us the minute we forget that. They're not on their side, they're on our side. Yeah, curiously, you have hit that. I still feel angry about those days. I'm trying not to become heterophobic. Someone accused me of that recently. And oh my God, am I heterophobic? Does that actually exist? Which I'm not. I mean, I had a mother. I had a mother, and I've got a brother. So I don't think I'm heterophobic. And some of the nicest people I've known have been heterosexual. So so gosh, is it me? Or is that the Welsh bit of me coming out? They tend to be a fiery mob. I think we've got to keep the flame of faith alive. It's one of those undervalued, like the R word, the religion word is undervalued nowadays because it's given such a bad press, normally for the right reasons. So, what religious people should be doing is thinking, okay, we've got something to learn here. Not, not all men, not everyone to the barricade. It doesn't always mean that. Sometimes it means the angels are giving you a learning opportunity. And certainly in my case, I wish I'd have, channeled the fires and the energies that did come from that time into a more effective use. I mean, what's going on at the moment with hospital provision in this country? I mean, at the risk of being too topical, because there is a risk with that, I suppose. I mean, I'm not an unbeliever in the pandemic. It's devastating populations across the world. I am a skeptic of the way the British government is handling it because it seems to be using it as an excuse to take back centuries of civil liberties, which actually were the result of our liberal ancestors. They weren't given to us by the feudal elite, they had to be earned. So I am deeply worried about what's going on there. I think some people have misunderstood what I'm saying on the social media. No, I will be there with the best of them. Take the vaccine, shut up, take the vaccine. Can we help you? Have you got food? Have you got shelter? Are people looking after you? I mean, certainly when I was still more based in Clapham than they are at the moment, I had a lot of the homeless coming up to me saying because of all the fast food places being closed, there was nowhere to eat. And that hadn't even crossed my mind, which shame on me. And so I started writing to the local council who told me it was none of my business. How about that? So I'm a clergyman writing about a social need, but it's none of my business. I noticed eventually they started opening up local hotels and sort of, B&B's, bed and breakfast. But as far as I know, they've all been turfed out now. And hang on, so the third wave has hit Britain. So why are they back on the street? So I'm very, very worried that the lessons of the past haven't been learned. And I suppose what I'm trying to do is channel the awareness and urgency that we did learn at that time into a relevancy of ministry that is effective in the here and now. I mean, I don't know if that answers you. Because as I was saying to you, I think off air slightly before we started, the reason I didn't say anything about anti-Semitism or people used to tease me, you've got a big mouth, Reverend. Why haven't you said anything about anti-Semitism or prejudice, anti-gay prejudice? Was because I honestly thought after all the marching, after all the protesting, after all the arrests, after all the legislation, after all the arguments, after all the fights, after all of it, those basic problems were, at least they were on a level whereby they could be dealt with, and society had to face them whether it liked it or not. I'm talking about British society. I'm very uncomfortable talking about the mechanics of another society, even if it is America, because I know it's our other home, like your other home is here. But there are just one too many differences for me to comment, in any meaningful way. So, but yeah, I've got a great deal to say about Britain. And so that's why I went quiet, because I thought at least we've got a basis now to, talk about the issues. But if there was, and I'm beginning to think, oh God, David, was that you being optimistic? Was it there? Was there that level of understanding there? That's beginning to be denuded. I mean, there was a report that came out in the European press a couple of days ago about how gay rights and LGBTQI people across Europe were beginning to feel the hand of oppression and prejudice again across Europe. It's not 2021. What is wrong? And some people are saying, well, thank God for Brexit, which of course is also the wrong response, because it's happening here too. Whether you're pro-Brexit or anti-Brexit, I was actually against Brexit, but that's another thing. The fact that those gains are being rolled back, I think, is very disturbing. And that's why I'm trying to rekindle, or at least channel those fires into a different direction. We're not back at square one, but we're back at a point whereby the debate needs to be initiated again. And we've got to be a lot more gutsy, because certain things have changed and we're much more visible now. I think if the press had its way, we're either presented as clowns or freaks, or that's the sideshow. Don't worry about all of that. That's the sideshow. Let's talk about hard economics and family values. We're not a sideshow. We're not freaks. We're not the periphery. Families have gay people. We have families. So, treat us with a bit of respect and let the debate start again, but on a more equal footing. And I think that's what I'm trying to safeguard nowadays, to make sure something like that actually occurs and we're not just swept away. I noticed that Ian McKellen, who of course was not only one of our foremost actors, is it only me that hates him as Gandalf? Love, stop overacting. Stop overacting, please. We all know you're a wizard. Stop it. I noticed he, after years himself of letting the land lie a bit, even he recently was getting a bit uppity again. And I thought, oh, right, it's getting to him as well, that the scenes are shifting and we've got to be a bit more careful. Yeah, let's all be angry again. It was great fun in those days. And my God, social evolution came out of it. Why not? I think you'll like my new book. It's on Andy Warhol. All I can think of at the moment is Andy Warhol. Get out of my head, Andy Warhol. He was much cleverer than I realized. I knew he was a clever dickie in those days, but I didn't realize how clever until doing all this research on him. A devout Catholic, of course, which people tend to forget. It only really came out at his funeral. A devout Ruthenian Catholic. I mean, he was at Mass every Friday. He tried to go to Mass as often as he could. And all of his vacations were either at Catholic or Episcopal soup kitchens. So he's in heaven. He's in heaven. I've never doubted the angels were on our side. I don't think someone like Warhol did. Because they're angels. People have to remain true to the concept. I mean, certainly his background is so-called pop art. I'm beginning to have whole new views of what pop art is. I think it's actually something very traditional. It's not quite what it said it was as a new visual movement. Actually, I think you can trace something like that back to the Renaissance. But that's a different discussion, I think. And God is what God is. The angels are what they are. Christ is what Christ is. And God is what God is. God is love. God isn't, I will love you only if you do what I say. God isn't, right, I love you now, but all these nasty people are speaking on my behalf. That's not God. God isn't, I love you, provided you answer a checklist like the Southern Baptist of all the things I want you to think. It's not that sort of thing. I mean, God is love. And that is an incredibly complex, I mean, it sounds simple, but it's not. That's a complex metaphysic that I personally believe is intertwined through the whole of creation. Love. We live in a living, loving, wise continuum. None of us would be here. None of us would exist in this glittering continuum if love and wisdom weren't the primary factors. We must never lose sight of what these things actually mean and not give in to people that tell us they actually mean something else. I mean, if you look at the theology of the fathers, where are all the mothers? They were there. They were there. Why were they silenced? They were there. Mary Magdalene was either the wife of Jesus Christ or an apostle or both. And of course, the Gospel of Magdalene, the Gospel pulls plural of Marys, they've all been silenced. I mean, they were silenced for political reasons. Let's not forget that. The theological debate back in those days got so ferocious that emperors used to intervene. So, the minute you begin looking back at history and think, why was that so ferocious? Oh, surprise, surprise, politics arises. So, so it's not to do with theology. It's to do with people fighting for power in the senates and the courts and the kingdoms in those days. That's what's going on. And none of them wanted the simplicity of God, or the complexity of God being love. If God is God and God is God, then we've got to remember that. Therefore, it's not. I love, excuse me, fathers, mothers, and their obnoxious brats. I remember seeing some born again posters. Oh my God, we used to go heckling born again types in this country. That's stopped nowadays. I remember seeing some wonderful posters, the perfect Aryan couple, Mr. and Mrs. White with their white children, all of whom smiling at eternity. So, okay, that's good too. If that floats your boat, great. But oh my God, there are gay people, there are black people, there are Hispanic people, and they can do it too. So we've got to remember that God is God and not let people say, well, he loves straight people and he loves you, but not really as much. I gave a sermon which nearly got me beaten to death years ago, saying that actually there's no such thing as a second-class sinner, and we're all sinners, by the way. That nearly got me murdered on the way out of the church. And in what way are we sinners? No, it's not to do with sexuality. Are we being loving people? It's to do with those things. What does Jesus say? I'm now having a checklist on your sexual desires. No, he doesn't. It's about, are you loving? Are you being friendly? Are you being wise? Are you treating people in a humane way? That's what he was worried about. And what Christians should be worried about, not this weird series of checklists that came in with the centuries that actually, to my mind, insult God by telling him, we're telling God his own business and we're telling the angels to mind theirs instead of doing what the gospel says. The gospel is the most radical thing in human history. Love each other. End of story. My God, the minute we arrive there, we're back in the Garden of Eden and we're back in paradise. So that's, and maybe it's the vocation. Can I say something completely bizarre and weird? Maybe it's gay people that will lead the way in that, because we've had so much thrown at us through the centuries and we're all still here. Maybe it's us that will take the lead and say, hey, we've stood it all and we're still loving people and we're still leading our lives, and ha, ha, ha. Probably say chin up and be a bit more optimistic. What was it that John Bunyan, the great Puritan poet, be of good cheer, friend, for all is well. Aren't they great words? Aren't they magnificent words? No matter how dark things get, no matter how terribly oppressive, believe in yourself if you can't believe in much else. Believe that you've got a right to breathe and a right to live and a right to exist, and you're not a cosmic accident. You're not simply the flotsam and jetsam of chemicals. You're not simply this soulless bag of chemicals in a universal void. Hey, that is a legitimate view, but it's not much of a view, and it doesn't really do justice to the human condition. And believe in yourself. I think the trouble with self-love, I think lots of Christians have trouble with the concept of self-love because it depends what you mean by self-love. If it means, I'm a complete bitch and I'm proud of it, that's no. Um, you know, and if that's good, I remember something on Oprah Winfrey years ago. Yes, I was one of the Brits that used to watch Oprah Winfrey. There was a young LGBT man who got a round of applause on one of her shows, who was going around breaking up gay couples, and that really foxed me. Why would you want to do that? And why are these people giving you a round of applause? And it took me ages to work out. He's hurt. It's really as simple as that. He's hurt. And that's his way of trying to get some sort of orientation back into his life. The sin was in the people giving a round of applause because that was prejudice. Are you discerning the spirit? No, you're all bigoted, prejudiced bastards. So that was the sin in that particular scene, not his. He was trying to come to terms with things. What we've got to do, of course we have to love ourselves. Of course we have to love ourselves. We're children of the All Highest. We're children of the Almighty. We're the glittering products of a sparkling universe that must never be lost sight of. What does it say in Matthew? Ye shall be as gods. When was the last time anybody said that in a church? It's all there if anybody wants to look. And what does our good Lord mean? You're wonderful. Love yourself. You're made by love and you're made by wisdom and you're made to glorify creation. How can anyone not love that? And we must love it in each other. Self-love for me, I'm into Kierkegaard. Hey, I'm into big books with no pictures. Yeah. Kierkegaard worries about self-love because I think he can see it easily being misunderstood as, I'm leading my life and get out my way. And that's what he's worried it can turn into. Because actually it shows that you're not leading your full life. You're leading a bit of your life, but you're also detrimental to other people's lives. So that's really not good. It's not cool. Whereas if you really understood self-love, it would be coming, sloppy agape. It would be agape. It would be this unconditional embracing of the continuum of the existential and your rightful place within the existential. So I wouldn't go back to David at 7 years old and say, by the way, it's all about the existential. What I would say is, you're going to have some hard knocks along the way. Not everybody's going to like you. And normally that will probably be for all the wrong reasons. Don't blame yourself. Think about it. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off and start all over again as the song goes. And keep the faith. Keep the faith that you're right and you're good and you're true. And you're there because the universe loves you. You're not there as an accident. So that's what I sort of say to my previous selves. There's an emphasized plural there.
Thank you for joining us today in the Queer Circle, David. To learn more about David's work, check out his website, davidwilliamparry.com. or on Instagram at dparry777, or go to queercirclepodcast.com for all this information and more. Music from today's episode provided by Purple Fluorite, found wherever music can be streamed.